This media project is going to be on the missing and damaged children of the pandemic. It all started with taking a few days off for school-wide deep cleaning. It might be a day or 3 days, and the school would send out notifications to parents and students telling them that with the new virus going around, they wanted just to make sure everything was clean to ensure the safety and health of all the students. Next, spring breaks were mostly extended another week, maybe another 2 weeks for extra cleaning until spring break was extended indefinitely to become an official lockdown. Every child was affected by COVID, but some were forever changed or never seen again. So let's get to the facts of the missing children. In the United States, 240,000 students never returned. Now, this number only accounts for 21 states that had enough information for a Stanford study to determine. So this only accounts for less than half the United States. And then we'll get specifically to Washington. 60,000 students never returned to public schools in Washington, and the Washington superintendent claims that none of these students are lost and that all 60,000 transferred to home schools or private schools. So through that study, I was directed to some other websites where I was able to find more data on just how many students did transfer. Now, when it came to homeschool, 18,800 students transferred to homeschool during our pandemic. Students who went to private schools during the pandemic was roughly 21,000. That number was a little harder to calculate because private schools are not required um, to announce their enrollment numbers. So it is up to their discretion if they want to talk about it or not. But the schools that did, there was a kind of a discrepancy. There was a certain number of schools during the 2020 school year and then less schools during the year after. So this is actually 2 years after I took the 2020 and 2 year later data to come up with the 21,000 number. And now when you add 21,000 and 18,800 and compare it to the 60,000 that never returned, that leaves 20,200 students unaccounted for in Washington that are not in a public school, a private school, or a homeschool. Now, the question we're all asking is where have the missing children gone? And the truth is, no one really knows where they all went. However, the ones that have returned have some pretty grim ideas. During lockdown, many high school students either chose to drop out to work or were forced by family to drop out of work and just never return back to school. They continued working. Some students had been homeless living on their own and just gave up on education. And some students were kicked out of their safe place. They were forced to spend 24 hours a day in a neglectful household with abusive people living without access to school or food or safe people or friends. My mom works as a paraeducator in a low-income school, and she either firsthand witnessed or her coworkers firsthand witnessed students from all these different scenarios, students who had to go back to a bad home and ended up running away, or went back to a bad home and just left some question marks. Students who were homeless living at the local homeless encampment who couldn't get access to Wi-Fi or Chromebooks. And now the ones that did return, not all of them were okay. Many students who remained accounted for and in school will never be the same. Young students have missed out on crucial lessons that are taught in the first few years of school, such as math, basic reading, and other things like sharing. There is a current thing going around social media of public school teachers announcing some of the issues that they're having with students. There are people who are talking about their fourth grade students can't read. They missed those years where they learned how to read or were supposed to, and now they just simply cannot read. Or you flash up to like the middle school students that they have, and they have middle school students who are reading at a second grade level because they missed out on those years where they were supposed to be able to read bigger text, longer text that had more depth to it. And then things like sharing, these students never learned how to interact with each other when they were just children, young children. And then you get to middle school, especially seventh graders. Seventh graders missed out on the interactions that start to shape them into young adults. They went straight from elementary school to high school, bypassing many milestones. These milestones are everything from, starting puberty and going through sex education or their first relationships and just more interactions between learning how to be a sixth grader and learning how to be a ninth grader, a freshman in high school. And then the last section that was really affected was the juniors and seniors. They missed out on activities like prom and graduation, causing depression and overall sadness. They didn't receive the pre-graduation resources and advice that would help them make the transition into adult life, like help with college essays or applying to colleges or FAFSA and things like job training, interviews, or creating resumes. They missed out on a lot of that stuff and they were suffering trying to find jobs when they got out of high school or trying to get into college at all after high school. Now, depression and anxiety and reasons for going online. Zoom classes during the pandemic, afterwards, many students battled with their mental health. They miss their friends, their teachers, being outside, doing stuff with their hands. Zoom broke students, they just burnt out. It was so bad for many that they never wanted to return in person. They moved to an online asynchronous school where they could do their work at their own pace. And a lot of them did this so they could finish school early and be done. And now, not every student that developed depression or anxiety or any other mental health issues, not all of them switched to online schools. They continued public school because it's a free public education and they're suffering, their grades are suffering, and they're not doing okay. Now, just kind of to wrap things up, the missing students, they may never resurface, and there's not much to be done about it so late. We're 3 years post, almost 4 years post COVID, and those students, they might be long gone. However, we can learn from what happened and become more encouraging of schools to do more check-ins with students about home life and try to prevent this from happening again. History repeats itself, including pandemics. It's science, it's inevitable. It's a constant cycle. However, maybe we can learn from our shortcomings and save the children from the same fate in the future. I think that the pandemic provided a lot of learning opportunities for the government, for school programs, for people in general. And I hope with all that information and seeing all of our failures during the pandemic, that if something like this were to happen again, we will be much better prepared for the next time and we won't lose children like we did. Students who are just completely missing, not just missing from school. There has been research showing that they're not only missing from school, but the population doesn't seem to, they, during census information, population hasn't seemed to decrease or anything like that. These students are out there somewhere, but they are not educated. They might be with their family. No one really knows what's happened to them, and that is heartbreaking. And it has put a lot of hardship on a lot of teachers and students and just the world in general. All we can do is hope that if this happens again, things will get better.